They say walking is the easiest way to burn fat. Step count goals, morning routines, fitness trackers buzzing with progress. Millions walk daily, believing the calories are melting away, especially around the belly. But for some, the scale doesn't move. The waistline stays the same, the fat remains. Not because walking doesn't work, but because the body has already changed the rules. Inside, a quiet metabolic shift has occurred, one that turns movement into maintenance, not transformation, one that makes the body resistant to burning what it once would have released effortlessly. This isn't about effort, it's about biology. Let's begin. The walking paradox. When movement stops working, walking burns calories, but not always from fat. For many, the body has adapted to conserve abdominal fat, prioritizing other fuel sources instead. And this chapter explores why walking alone sometimes fails to target belly fat, despite consistent effort. Walking is movement. Movement requires energy. Energy comes from fuel stored in the body, glycogen, muscle, fat. But the body chooses which fuel to burn based on internal priority, not external effort. For someone insulin sensitive, with balanced hormones and low inflammation, a 30-minute walk taps into fat stores efficiently. The body reads the signal: low intensity, steady state, fat oxidation activated. But for someone with elevated insulin, chronic stress, or metabolic adaptation, the body reads it differently. It burns sugar first, then amino acids from muscle. Fat, guarded, especially visceral fat, the kind stored deep around the organs, wrapped around the belly. This isn't laziness, it's survival physiology. The body has learned, over months or years of calorie restriction, high cortisol, or insulin resistance, that fat is precious. It becomes metabolically expensive to release. Hormones like insulin and cortisol create a biological lock around abdominal fat cells, preventing lipolysis, the breakdown of fat into usable energy. So you walk, you move, you burn calories. But the belly stays, not because walking doesn't work, because your metabolism has shifted into a defensive state, one where fat oxidation is no longer the default response to movement. This is the walking paradox: effort without the expected result, and it begins long before the first step is taken. The insulin wall. When fat stays locked, insulin is a hormone, a messenger. Its job is to move glucose from the bloodstream into cells for energy or storage. When you eat carbohydrates, insulin rises. When glucose enters the cells, fat burning pauses. This is normal. But when insulin stays elevated, hour after hour, day after day, the body enters a state called hyperinsulinemia. Fat cells receive a constant signal: store, don't release. Even during a walk, insulin blocks an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL. This enzyme is responsible for breaking down triglycerides inside fat cells into free fatty acids that can be burned for energy. Without HSL activation, fat remains trapped. The body is moving. The heart rate is up. Calories are being spent. But the fuel comes from circulating glucose, liver glycogen, even muscle tissue, not from the belly. This is why someone can walk 10,000 steps daily and still carry stubborn abdominal fat. The metabolic switch that activates fat oxidation never flips. Insulin keeps it off. Insulin resistance makes this worse. When cells stop responding to insulin's signal, the pancreas produces even more. Blood sugar stays elevated. Insulin stays elevated, and fat stays locked. This isn't a willpower issue, it's a hormonal one. Walking alone doesn't lower insulin. It helps, but only if the underlying insulin sensitivity is intact. If it's not, movement becomes maintenance, not fat loss. The body is protecting itself, but in doing so, it sacrifices the very goal you're working toward: cortisol in the belly. The stress-fat connection. Cortisol is released by the adrenal glands. Its purpose: mobilize energy during stress. In acute stress, danger, exertion, survival, cortisol raises blood sugar, sharpens focus, and breaks down tissue for fuel. Useful, temporary, but modern life creates chronic stress: work, sleep deprivation, undereating, overexercising, inflammation. The body perceives threat constantly. Cortisol stays elevated. And when cortisol is high, the body shifts fat storage toward the abdomen, specifically visceral fat, the metabolically active tissue wrapped around the liver, intestines, and pancreas. Why? Because visceral fat has more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat. It responds faster to stress signals. The body prioritizes storing energy in a location that can be quickly mobilized during perceived danger. But here's the contradiction. While cortisol promotes fat storage around the belly, it also inhibits fat oxidation during low-intensity activity. During a walk, the body needs to feel safe to burn fat. Cortisol signals the opposite. It tells the body to conserve, to protect, to hold on to reserves. So even though you're moving, like the hormonal environment says, not yet. Cortisol also increases insulin resistance, creating a double block. Insulin locks fat in. Cortisol keeps the belly prioritized for storage. Walking in a high cortisol state becomes a maintenance activity. It burns some calories, yes, but it doesn't trigger the deep fat oxidation needed to shrink the waistline. The body is responding to what it perceives as threat, and in that state, belly fat is the last thing it will give up. Metabolic adaptation. When the body learns to save, the body is adaptive. It learns. It compensates. When you eat less and move more, the body initially responds by burning stored energy. Weight drops. Fat decreases. This is expected. But if the calorie deficit continues for weeks or months, the body adjusts. It downregulates metabolism. It reduces non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT. It lowers thyroid output. It decreases mitochondrial efficiency. This is called metabolic adaptation or adaptive thermogenesis. The body is not broken. It is protecting itself from what it perceives as famine. Walking, once a fat-burning activity, now burns fewer calories than before. The same 30-minute walk that used to cost 150 calories may now cost 100. The same distance, same pace, less energy spent. Why? Because the body has learned to do more with less. Muscle becomes more efficient at contracting. The heart pumps with less effort. Even digestion slows. The body conserves energy at every level. And when energy expenditure drops, fat loss stalls. This is common in people who have dieted repeatedly, done excessive cardio, or undereaten for long periods. Their metabolism has adapted downward. Walking no longer creates the deficit it once did. The solution isn't more walking, it's metabolic restoration, rebuilding the systems that allow the body to burn efficiently again. But that takes time and rest, and often the opposite of what people think they should do. Metabolic adaptation is silent. You don't feel it happening. You just stop seeing results. The liver's role. The fat-burning filter. The liver is the body's metabolic hub. It processes nutrients, detoxifies waste, regulates blood sugar, and converts fat into usable energy. When the liver is healthy, it efficiently breaks down fatty acids and converts them into ketones or ATP, fuel the body can use during movement. But when the liver becomes overloaded, it stores fat inside its own cells. This is called hepatic steatosis, or fatty liver. Fatty liver is common. It affects nearly 25% of adults worldwide. It's caused by excess sugar, processed foods, alcohol, and chronic calorie surplus, especially fructose, which the liver metabolizes directly into fat. A fatty liver cannot oxidize fat efficiently. It becomes sluggish, congested. Its ability to process triglycerides and convert them into energy declines. So even if fat is released from abdominal tissue during a walk, the liver may not be able to process it. The fat recirculates in the bloodstream, eventually returning to storage. This creates a metabolic bottleneck. Movement happens. Fat is mobilized, but the liver can't complete the process. Walking becomes ineffective, not because the body isn't trying, but because the downstream pathway is clogged. Fatty liver also worsens insulin resistance, creating a feedback loop. High insulin promotes fat storage. Fat storage overwhelms the liver. The liver becomes less efficient. Insulin rises further. The belly stays. The liver struggles, and walking alone can't reverse it. Healing the liver requires dietary change, not just movement. But that's a biological necessity, not advice. The body is speaking. The liver is signaling. The question is whether the signal is being heard. Inflammation and fat release. When the body guards, what it stores, inflammation is the immune system's response to injury or threat. Acute inflammation heals. Chronic inflammation damages. When inflammation becomes systemic, triggered by poor diet, lack of sleep, stress, gut dysfunction, or environmental toxins, it affects every tissue, including fat cells. Fat tissue, especially visceral fat, is not inert. It is metabolically active. It produces hormones and inflammatory molecules called cytokines. When inflamed, it releases substances like TNF-alpha and IL-6, which interfere with insulin signaling and fat oxidation. Chronic inflammation also damages mitochondria, the cellular engines that burn fat for energy. Fewer functional mitochondria means less capacity to oxidize fatty acids, even when they're available. The body becomes metabolically inefficient. Movement happens, but energy production lags. Fat breakdown slows. The belly remains. Inflammation also elevates cortisol and insulin, reinforcing the hormonal blocks discussed earlier. It creates a state where the body prioritizes defense over fat loss. This is why someone with chronic inflammation, perhaps from gut issues, autoimmune conditions, or long-term stress, may walk daily and see no change in body composition. The body is fighting. It's inflamed. It's protecting. And in that state, fat is treated as a critical reserve, not expendable fuel. Walking doesn't reduce inflammation on its own. It can help, but only if the inflammatory load is manageable. If it's not, the body stays in defense mode, and the belly fat stays locked. The body's real language. What stubborn fat is telling you, the body speaks in symptoms, in patterns, in physical signs that reveal what's happening beneath the surface. Stubborn belly fat is one of those signs. It doesn't mean laziness. It doesn't mean failure. It means the metabolism has shifted. The hormones are imbalanced. The systems responsible for fat oxidation are compromised. It's a message. Something deeper needs attention. Maybe it's insulin resistance. Maybe it's chronic cortisol elevation. Maybe it's a congested liver, damaged gut, or mitochondrial dysfunction. Walking is movement. Movement is valuable, but it's not a metabolic reset. It's not a hormonal correction. It's a tool, one piece of a much larger system. When walking doesn't work, the body isn't broken. It's responding to the environment it's been given. The food, the stress, the sleep, the years of adaptation. Understanding this shifts the perspective. It's no longer about doing more. It's about restoring balance, rebuilding sensitivity, healing the systems that make fat loss possible. The body wants to release fat. It's designed to, but only when it feels safe, when insulin is controlled, when cortisol is regulated, when the liver is clear, when inflammation is low. That's the real language of the body, and stubborn belly fat is simply one of its words. Walking is not the problem. The body's internal environment is insulin resistance, cortisol dysregulation, metabolic adaptation, fatty liver, inflammation. These are the